Many of you have been asking me to make this video, so here you are. This video is for all of you out there that love these amazing fish, mudskippers. So today I'm going to make a video talking about my mudskippers specifically, but also as a bonus, we're going to talk about some of the other brackish water fish that I have and a little bit about brackish aquariums. Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Zenzo from Tazawa Tanks. Now, the first thing I want to cover is what is a mudskipper? A lot of people don't know what these are. They'll see them, they think they're cool. They don't realize that they are a fish because they look like an amphibian. So they appear to be amphibious. They come out of the water, they kind of walk on land a little bit. They almost look like those prehistoric first animals that came out of the oceans and started living on land. They kind of look like that. They are in fact a fish that was kind of like a walking fish. And some would call them an amphibious fish. And they are fish that have adapted to spend a lot of their life out of the water. And as long as they're wet, they are fine. So as they can actually breathe through their skin. So they do have gills because they are a fish, so they can breathe through their gills when they're underwater. But as long as their skin is wet, they can also absorb oxygen through their skin. Now, don't ask me how that works. If you want to look that up, you can read the scientific papers that talk about, all the different aspects of the anatomy of a mudskipper. But anyway, that's what those fish are. They're actually part of the goby family, so you might be very familiar with other goby fish that might be more popular, like bumblebee gobies or night gobies and things like that. You'll see gobies in freshwater, brackish water, saltwater. They are part of that same family. Now, as far as where they are located, they are a brackish fish, meaning that they are a fish that is in brackish water, which is a mixture of freshwater and saltwater. So you would find them in coastal areas around the world. Predominantly, you're going to find them I think along the Atlantic coast in Africa, the Indian Ocean, parts of Asia. They're even in Japan. So if you're in any of those parts of the world, you may have seen mudskippers when you go down to the beach or the estuary, things like that. But anyway, they do require brackish water, but they are a fun fish to keep and pretty easy to keep if you do a few things. Now, the great thing about mudskippers is that they come in different sizes based on the species. So some of them can be quite small, like my Indian mudskippers back there, which we'll see, or even some that are a little bit larger, like the African mudskippers that I keep. And if you do have like a giant large aquarium, you could do some of the larger species that get to be like this big. I don't really have the facility to take care of a large mudskipper. Maybe one day I will, but for now I keep both the Indian and the African variant. They're very common in the hobby, as they are still manageable for most tank sizes. Now, as far as keeping mudskippers, it's pretty easy, and we're going to get into a little bit about brackish tanks and the tank setup and things like that. But they're easy to feed. They are carnivorous, so you're going to need to feed them some type of animal protein. So that can be freeze-dried foods like freeze-dried crickets or mealworms, which I will use from time to time. Freeze-dried krill is something that works very well for me as well. It could be live foods. It could be live crickets. It could be live wingless fruit flies. It could be live mealworms, which also works well. They could even eat small fish. So you do want to be careful there depending on which ones you have together. So for example, like my African mudskippers, they will eat like guppies and mollies and things like that if they are in the same tank. So you do want to be careful if you do have some situation where you don't want to have that predatory behavior, but you can feed them live fish if you do have like extra coals or things like that you need to move on. What I like about mine is that in addition to the live food and the freeze-dried food, and I also feed them frozen foods like frozen bloodworms, brine shrimp, is that mine have taken to eating flake food. So I can give them like the extreme krill flake, and I can put that on a rock or even in my hand, and they'll come into my hand and eat it right out of my hand. So very easy to feed, and these are all wild caught. These are not bred in captivity, so they're wild caught, and the fact that you take a wild fish and quickly adapt it to eating a food like a flake food is pretty phenomenal. Now, as far as the behavior of mudskippers, it kind of varies by the type that you're keeping, but they all kind of have a similar behavior where I would say if you're not accustomed to them, they're kind of cichlid-like in their behavior. So they can be a little bit territorial, which means that they can be a little bit aggressive. They can bicker with one another and kind of posturize and fight over food and places in the aquarium or the paludarium. And so that is something to consider. So I would shy away from them if you're totally opposed to any type of aggression whatsoever, because they will display a little bit of aggression towards one another. But it's nothing like certain species of fish, like African cichlids, that will kill each other because of territory or mating. I have not seen that type of behavior in the few years that I've been keeping them, both in the African and the Indian variants. So one thing that I've noticed is if you have enough space to where they can each kind of have their own part of the paludarium or the aquarium, then you'll have a better chance. If you have things like line of sight breaks, that will help as well. So one mudskipper doesn't see the other one across the tank. And what I've also been experimenting with in my African mudskipper tank is kind of increasing the population. So instead of having just a few, having several in there, that way things kind of get crowded and you can't have like targeted aggression towards one mudskipper or another. It's just kind of like a free-for-all, and so far it's been working a lot better for me that way. Now let's talk a little bit about brackish water and brackish tanks, because this is something that comes up all the time when people have questions for me about the mudskippers or any brackish tank in particular. One thing that's great about brackish water is that it's very easy to make. You don't have to be very precise about it like you would in a saltwater or a reef tank. So in my experience, having kept Fowler tanks, saltwater tanks, having kept reef tanks, and obviously freshwater tanks, the brackish tanks are a little bit more work than a freshwater tank, but nowhere close to the amount of precise measuring and efforts that it takes to keep a healthy saltwater or reef tank. The reason why is brackish water is it's never exactly the same. It's constantly changing. So in the natural environment, if you have a fish that's living in a brackish environment, depending on the tide or the range or the flow of the river or whatever is happening, the water might be fully fresh to fully salt and everything in between, and the fish are able to adapt to those changes. So you don't have to be precise, you just kind of want to be within a range, and if you're within that range, it's pretty easy. Now I've made other videos about how to set up a brackish tank, so I will put I'll put some links down below or up above here. And in fact, we also wrote an article for the Aquarium Co-op website, so within the next week or two, that should be published and available for you guys to see, and then I'll put a link of that down below as well so that you can check that out and you can learn more about setting up a brackish tank, which is not that difficult. Now the one thing, if you're going to keep mudskippers, is that you're going to need lots of land. In fact, the land area is probably more important than the water area. So as long as your land is damp, then it's good. So you might notice in some of my aquariums from the B-roll where it'll have like a centimeter or a couple centimeters, a half an inch or quarter inch of water in there. And that way they're on land, they're above the water, and they're just absorbing oxygen through their skin, but they're still wet. They're still being able to stay damp without being completely out of the water totally. So in all of my mudskipper setups, and I have 3 different mudskipper setups, they all have an area for the mudskippers to be 100% out of the water if they want to, and also partially in and out of the water if they so choose. And then they can also go fully into the water and swim in the water, but they don't really swim like a normal fish. They kind of like do that down to the bottom, and they'll eat off the bottom, then they'll kind of swim back up to the top. So anyway, setting up a brackish tank and setting up a paludarium is not that difficult. I've made videos about that before, so you can check those out. That's not what this video is about. This is kind of more about just showing off the fish and talking a little bit about them in general. So now let's talk a little bit about some of my other brackish systems that I have. And I currently have, I don't know, I didn't count before I made this video, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6? 5. I think 5 right now. So I've got 6 brackish tanks set up with different fish in there. I've got puffers, mudskippers, gobies. We have mollies in one, blennies. So there are lots of different types of fish that you can get for brackish tanks, and even fish that would be suited for freshwater can also live in brackish water, like guppies as an example, like mollies as an example. So you do have some versatility there. Now, going around and looking at some of my aquariums, some of my favorites are probably going to be my puffers, just because they have so much personality. I love to watch them watch me. So if I enter the room, they start to kind of swim back and forth and surf the glass, waiting for me to give them something tasty to eat, and I've even had them eat out of my hand before. So very fun to interact. They're very personal looking fish because of their big eyes and their behavior, so it's hard not to fall in love with them. I also really enjoy my top hat blennies, and this is a fish that's very rare in the aquarium hobby. You don't see them very often. When you do see them, they're sold as a freshwater fish, but in fact they should be kept in a brackish environment, which is what they would be in naturally in the wild. Also a very fun fish, watching them interact with one another, chase each other around, and also swim up to the front and top of the glass when I'm going to feed them. We talked about my puffers, so I have a couple different puffers. I have a green spotted puffer. I have a figure 8 puffer. That puffer, I've had him for several years now, a few years, I think maybe three or 4 years now. He's not doing great. It's been kind of skinny for a while. I've run medication treatments through him a few times, took him out of the tank that he was in before, put him in a dedicated 20-gallon tank by itself. It acts healthy, it swims healthily, it eats normally, it just doesn't look great. So I might have to consult like a fish veterinarian and get some more advice there. But anyway, for the time being, I'm trying to keep it happy and healthy. I do also have some night gobies, and the night gobies are a very, very interesting looking fish, a goby. But the hard part about them is they hide all of the time. So basically when I want to see them, I'll have to put some food in the aquarium. Usually I'll put like some bloodworms or something that's quite fragrant to them, and then I'll just kind of stand to the side or just sit down and just wait for them to come out of their hiding caves. And then once they come out, they'll eat and kind of forage along and bicker with one another before they go back in the caves as soon as I move. But really cool fish as well. They are also a little bit on the large size side. So if you're going to keep certain fish with them, just be careful that the night gobies are not going to kill or eat the other fish, because that did happen to me in one situation. Another fun fish that I keep are the bumblebee gobies, and the bumblebee gobies is the fish that I have in the Indian mudskipper paludarium, where the bumblebee gobies occupy the water area of that paludarium. So paludarium is a combination of an aquarium and like a terrarium, so land and water. So obviously for mudskippers, you need to have like a land area, and then for anything aquatic, you want to have it in the water. So the bumblebee gobies will live in that water, and they kind of swim around in that 40-gallon tank. Very fun, beautiful, kind of a nano brackish fish that does quite well with the Indian mudskippers, because the Indian mudskippers are not large enough to harass or eat the bumblebee gobies. And lastly, as I shared, I also have other fish. I have mollies. Now, I've kept other fish in brackish water like guppies as an example, but currently I have a bunch of mollies. Now, it used to be like sailfin mollies only, and then I got some lyre tails, and now it's like a mixture of lyre tails and sailfins, because I wasn't, selectively trying to breed or anything. I just wanted to keep a nice tank with a bunch of mollies in there. So they are in with a couple African mudskippers. A couple of reasons. One, I needed a place for those 2 African mudskippers, and then also I needed something to kind of curb the population of the mollies, because it was getting out of control. So they kind of help by picking off 1 or 2 a week if there's a new fry or something that they can grab, and just kind of keeps the population in check. And it also works out well because I do have that land area in that tank. Now, the last thing I want to cover when it comes to brackish tanks, and I get a lot of questions about this part of brackish tanks, and that is plants. Now, if you keep aquarium plants, or if you've been keeping them for some time, you may know that plants and salt water don't work very well in most cases. And when I say salt water, I'm saying salty water. We're talking about brackish water, not full-on marine. In my experience, and this is only my experience, not anybody else's or not what I read on the internet, most plants don't do well in the brackish environment. They might live, they might survive, but they won't thrive, and I won't see like any noticeable growth that's going to indicate to me that that plant is doing well. So far the only like aquatic plant that I've tried that has not like died or dwindled away is Java fern, and I've tried it a couple different methods. One method was fully submersed in a full brackish aquarium, and then another one is immerse, so meaning part of it is out of the water, and that's in a paludarium. And in both situations, it seems to be doing okay. I would say that it's probably doing a little bit better in the immersed situation where it's partly out of the water, and that might be just due to the exposure to the atmosphere. Maybe there's more CO2 than there would be in full aquatic environment. But even in the aquatic environment, I do see new growth. It just hasn't been taking off like it would in a freshwater tank, but still, it is doable. Now, the other plants that have worked well for me with the brackish systems are trees, and those are the mangroves. So you can see that I've got the mangrove growing out of the Indian mudskipper tank. I've got the mangrove growing out of the green spotted puffer and night goby tank. And the mangroves do quite well because they are accustomed to being in brackish water. That's where they come from. If you have ever been to parts of the world or anywhere that has, trees that are growing right into, like, essentially where the ocean is, those are mangrove trees with their roots hanging down, and that's what these are. So those do well, obviously. People talk about other plants that do well in brackish water. I've tried, and for me, they didn't work. It doesn't mean in your situation that it won't work, but I've tried Anubias, I've tried Java moss, I've tried, hornwort, I've tried kabamba. There are a few plants that I've tried that just didn't do well in my situation. People will say, like, you can try like Valsinaria, certain crypts will work well. I don't know if they will work well or if they will just do okay. But personally, as far as what I've had success with, it's only been Java fern and mangroves. Well, if you made it this far, I do want to thank you. Hopefully this is the video that you were looking for when a lot of you were asking me to give an update on my mudskippers and my puffers and things like that. So this is kind of a full-on overview of the brackish aquariums that I have. If you've made it this far again, please do me a big favor and hit that like button. It may not seem like it's much to you, but to me, it means a lot, not because of my ego and wanting to see how many likes are on there, but because of the algorithm with YouTube. Having that activity really does help to get this video out to more people, which also helps me in return. And also, if you have not done so already by this point, please do consider subscribing to this channel. So many people, I want to say 72% of the people that watch my videos just watch the videos, and you might be a repeat viewer, but you've never hit that subscribe button. So please do so if you've not done so already. Before I say goodbye, do me a big favor and comment down below which is your favorite brackish fish that I keep. Maybe even your favorite brackish tank that I keep. But also, I would love to read down below your experience keeping brackish water aquariums. And if you've had any success with plants, please write down below what plants you've done and how they've lived or survived in your brackish systems. And did they really thrive, or they were just kind of like okay for a year or so and then you took them out? So anyway, that's all I had for now. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.